Today, we're looking at a blue ink by Callifolio Azur Blue. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, if you like fountain pen ink reviews, I would invite you to subscribe. Also, if you're interested, you can follow me over on Instagram. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I did the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Levenger True Writer with a broad nib. I used it to write for a day, and then to take my notes for this video. This first writing sample is done on a standardized set of paper of Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia. There are additional writing samples later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form. It comes in a vial that looks something like this. To keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no real shading. Now the extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, great shading within, as in quick is a nice mid-tone, the K is much darker. Fox is a little darker on the very left curve of the F, but lighter throughout the rest. The word "the" is noticeably darker than the other words around it, and only 9 seconds to dry. The medium is darker than the extra fine, about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and almost no real shading, 13 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby shows a little bit of color variation far left to far right of the extra fine, nothing in the medium, which is kind of what we got in the writing. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread. It does have halo, a little bit of halo. I see it better in the word Azur, and I see it better on the end of Callifolio, but not so much on the beginning. So it's not always there, but it definitely is there. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo, sheen, but some much better shading. Quick starts darker, gets a little lighter, much darker on the K. Brown starts darker and works its way lighter. Fox is a nice light tone, especially compared to the word lazy. 16 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, just a little bit lighter than the stub. Medium has no feather spread. It does have halo. The halo comes with some of the shading, and it has no sheen. So quick starts darker, gets a little bit lighter and a little darker, and it's a slight change in tone. But there's halo, no halo, halo. Brown starts darker and gets lighter and has full halo to none. So it's very nice. 21 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us really not a lot of color variation. The extra fine shows on camera much more than the medium, although we did okay in the writings. Rhodia. No bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. 11 seconds to dry. Medium's darker than the extra fine, but not quite as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and almost no shading. 14 seconds to dry. The scrubby for the extra fine shows some color variation, although not really getting it. The medium doesn't really show any, and we didn't get any. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. We see this is a great prime blue. There is no mix here. It's pushing its way straight up, pushing the ink, and it's gathering more as it moves up, which is what you expect. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And we do see that some of that ink is really starting to bond with the filter paper quite quickly, and the rest is pushing it up. It does give you the idea that there might be the slightest bit of resistance for this ink. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before I test it. Looking at the highlighter, my eye's immediately drawn to the lowercase h that's completely blown out and makes me say I would not use it in a note-taking situation if I want to highlight. Water is lifting all the darkest tones, but leaving the lighter blue that we saw in the second chromatography at the bottom. Pen flush is completely breaking this ink up. We're starting to see the white of the paper come through, which means you shouldn't need anything more than pen flush to get this out of your pen. Now the 1/3 bleach solution does completely remove it from the paper, but it's leaving this kind of yellow staining behind. But you don't need bleach solution to get this out of your pen. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with a realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Now I'm going to link a video where I show how I test it and how I calculate the data. Callifolio Azur has a viscosity of 2.15, making it just inside normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all of those. Now for the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Callifolio Azur has an average dry time of 14 seconds, making it, again, just inside normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Callifolio Azur, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And here I went with a nice red because you can't miss putting red with blue. I chose Colorverse Mars Curiosity. The second writing sample is done on yellow Rhodia, G-Lalo, and Franklin Christoph paper. Here we're looking at the yellow Rhodia paper to see how that yellow tone could affect the tone of the ink as it's coming through, especially with this being such a great prime blue. So we're not looking at the characteristics in the way we did the other writing samples, but just tone change. Now at first you might not think it's here, but when you put them side by side, it definitely takes on a little bit of a turquoise leaning green in the stub. The blue, same thing, different tones, but still, it's definitely making a shift towards a green turquoise. Same with the medium. So we are seeing some color variations, not so much in the scrubby, but in the writings, we're definitely seeing some color change for it being with a yellow background. Now here we have G-Lalo. It's a gray paper. Sometimes has trouble with inks that look nice on it. It has no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. Now the extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no real shading, 4 seconds to dry. Medium is way darker than the extra fine, little bit darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade, 7 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we didn't get any. Last up is Franklin Christoph paper. No bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade, 3 seconds to dry. Medium, much darker than the extra fine, a little bit darker than the stub, no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 6 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we didn't get any color variation, and that is all that I have for writing samples. So what do I think of Callifolio Azur blue? This is slightly lighter than the blue that I would prefer. Now it is very well behaved, and it does tend to offer some shading in a lot of pens, but the tone being a little bit lighter than what I would prefer with so many blues on the market to choose from just doesn't make it the blue for me. But looking at it in the writing does make me understand why anybody could choose this as their go-to blue ink. So what nib and pen give the best writing experience with this ink? I'm willing to sacrifice shading to get a better tone, the tone that I get from a wet broad pen. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and thanks for watching.